Mefi, Nana, Abdul Karim, Mohammed, Kwame.
Faces of frustration, queuing up to complain. This is the rent office in Takoradi, Western region. Among those here are people faced with rents that have doubled in the last year alone. Most have been given two options: pay up or move out.
John Matthew Barnabas Ishen, Millicent Ishen, Elijah Polly, John Chrissy Bruce.
We have a few cases where landlords apply here complaining about non-payment of rent by tenants, and that has always proven to be true. Some tenants actually do not pay their rent, not because the rent are exorbitant, but it's just the sheer neglect and negligence of checking their responsibilities as tenants who have to pay their rents regularly. There is a few of them that come here. We also have situations where tenants are arbitrarily being ejected by their landlords.
Takoradi, the epicenter of Ghana's oil find, has always been a hype and an expensive town to live in. But when oil came, everything changed. And according to residents here, this change was for the worse. And this is the change that is hitting many people in Takoradi really hard.
Initially, there were very high expectations. People thought that oil was coming in and that was the answer to our problems. And a lot of people in Western region and others also thought that the oil has come in, so people will get employed and there will be development in that regard. But rather, we were in a rush, so we did not consider all the externalities, the negative externalities, which include spill over into the region and then rise of goods and services and rent and others, which will have effect on the other populace who are not directly gaining benefit from the oil. And this prevented us of thinking about.
All right, so that's our latest documentary, if you like, Justice on 5 years of oil. A little playback of that, but the full one was played yesterday. Don't know what you think about it so far, but if you live in the Western region, you are in Sekondi, Takoradi, I'm sure that you're experiencing most of the things that Justice discovers in this documentary. And my colleague Justice.Video has just joined me in studio to tell us about his experience on this particular journey. I was telling Roland before that you live in this region. Yeah. This is your region, yeah? So what is new? I mean, a friend of mine has just got a new job in Takoradi. So she's moving to Takoradi with her family. And getting a place in terms of accommodation has been like a headache. Yeah. It's more expensive than a lot of the places even in Accra. Exactly. And that's very surprising.
Exactly. And this is a region that does not have the economic boom to support that kind of living cost. So for example, if you lived in Accra, you can afford such high rent because there's more to do. So that is just one of the many issues that have been complicated the more by oil find and the start of commercial production 5 years ago. So basically this film was to take myself as someone who grew up in the Western region to sort of and saw the euphoria and the expectations that greeted the announcement of the oil find in 2007 to look at what has changed. So many works have been done already in terms of research and everything, but we haven't really been able to capture what it is that has happened in Takoradi and the other coastal communities that surround the city in the last 5 years. So I went back to Takoradi and I did this work. It's a work that has been going on for about 3 months. So basically to interview people to find out who the winners and the losers are out of Ghana's oil industry.
So what are the conclusions?
It's interesting, and for me as someone who grew up in the region, I find it very difficult to really tell what the story is, because about 5 years ago, Takoradi was on the up. It was the city the city to go to. There was more, in many ways, the nodal city where everybody wanted to go.
Yeah.
Nightclubs started springing up. In fact, before 2007, someone told me there was just one active nightclub in Takoradi. Today, there are about more than 10 of them. And it only tells you the sort of activity, the sort of human influx that has gone on. And all of this has contributed to increase in the numbers, demand for jobs, rising rent, rising cost of living, and all of that. But what has also happened is that there hasn't been that economic boom to support those expectations.
It's not like the people have the money.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about the oil city. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be rich.
Yeah.
But
And so, like, for example, I said in this that Takoradi has always been a hype city. I mean, it was in many ways the beginning of Ghana's industrial revolution. If you look at the railways and how it began in the 1920s, and how it was the places where electricity, for example, began to spread to other parts of the country. How the harbor started in Takoradi, the mining in Takwa up north of the region, and all of that. So in many ways, Takoradi has always been a big place to go.
But it was more like low-key. For me personally, it was like a relaxing zone for me.
And with all these nice beaches and all. But many people, I think, from what I saw, have been shocked by what has gone on. And what has happened recently is that because oil price itself is not doing well on the international market, the industry is sort of shrinking, or at worst shrinking.
But who brought the shock? Because I feel that it's the people in Sekondi, Takoradi who have done this to themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody asked them to raise the rents.
Yeah.
They just imagine that once oil has been found here, then a lot of money will come. So they started just raising everything.
Because I mean, this film is actually a two-part documentary, one of which looks at Cape 3 Point, which is Ghana's southernmost community, which was used in many ways as the geographical reference point for the oil find in 2007. And the interesting bit is that in 2007, I had just come out of senior high school, and I had taken up a job as a people teacher. And the community where I was teaching was just 5 kilometers away from Cape 3 Point.
Okay.
And so in the half and puff of 2007's fury over oil find, I went to Cape 3 Point to see what this whole town was about. And then it was interesting how people would say that the road leading to the community, which was really run down, was going to be turned into double roads. And people would tell me that, look, Masa Obaha, in the next 10 years, like, you won't find us here again, because the politicians are telling us we are going to be living in skyscrapers and all that. And this was just at the time when we were preparing for the 2008 elections. And so I think that we were carried away by the elections euphoria and all of that, and the expectations ran wild. And you can't blame the people. It was people fueled that kind of expectations, and that is what has gone on to create the situation where we are, where the money isn't there, but everybody says this is oil city, and you interview people and they say, well, we haven't even seen oil before, but we are paying for it.
TZ sends me a message. He says, any decent chamber and hall apartment goes for 250 Ghana cedis, and you must pay 2 years of advance. This is shocking to me, because I had colleagues who were living in one apartment, and they were even paying monthly. And it was very small money.
Exactly.
And to think that you're paying 250 for a chamber and hall in Takoradi, you have to pay 2 years advance. That's surprising.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is that many people are now moving out of Takoradi. So people for who such high expensive apartments were built for 5 years ago, expecting the boom, are moving out, because these are usually the engineers, the people who are working on the oil fields and all of that. But because the industry is not doing well, many are moving to other other parts of the country. So many have moved to Ivory Coast, for example. Many have just gone back because the industry is not as big as it was 5 years ago. And so what has happened is that 3 years ago, they had rooms that were going for like $2,000 a month. And now there's nobody, the people who these buildings were meant for are not there.
They couldn't afford to pay $2,000 a month.
And so the buildings are there. People need buildings, people need places to stay, but someone like me, or like, I mean, middle-class Ghanaians wouldn't really be able to afford a room for $2,000 a month. And so what has happened is that it's not as if there are no rooms. There are rooms. There are so many rooms. In fact,
but they've been overpriced.
Exactly.
The people can't afford
and so people can't afford. If you go to the residential areas in Takoradi, like Airport Road, Chapel Hill, Beach Road, Windy Ridge, there are all of these apartments that were built that 3 years ago were full and were actually hot cake, but now they are empty, and real estate developers are losing money. People who need houses wouldn't have places to stay because they just can't pay.
Amazing. The question is now who caused some, but what do you want this documentary? I mean, what do you want people to pick out of this piece that you put together?
I think that, I mean, there's an election in 2016.
This is an election year.
It's an election year. And I think that we have an opportunity to sort of right the wrongs of 2007 in terms of the way we go about the campaigning, as in raising people's expectations. I think that the reason why we are here is because we expected so much. And the truth is that Ghana's oil industry isn't in like that of Nigeria, where you have it onshore, and so there are so many direct and indirect jobs that will throw up. Ours isn't like that, and so most of the jobs, even there are any, are high-skilled jobs, and in many of the areas surrounding the small communities in Takoradi, you wouldn't really have those high-skilled engineers and all of them taking part. And so what really, and part of this documentary talks about how locals can be, how investment in local economy, so for example, other alternative livelihoods, like say agriculture, which is doing very well in the region because of the fertile lands and everything, so that people can then take advantage of the indirect benefit of oil. So for example, there are people coming in, there are rising numbers in the city and everything, but then they are going to need other stuff like food, like all these other things. And so investing in other sides of the economy which are not directly oil, so that people can then benefit from the spillover effect of oil. But I mean, it's not all doom and gloom for Ghana, for 5 years of oil in Ghana, I think. And I did a piece for my journal line this week in which I said I am a good example myself of what good corporate social responsibility could do in terms
because you got sponsorship.
Exactly, and it's the reason why I think that if we do the right things, and I mean, my career as a journalist has turned around 360 degrees because of the experience I had. So
once you mention it, tell us about it. You got sponsorship to go and do what exactly?
So last year I was part of 52 young Ghanaian graduates who got the opportunity to study in top UK universities, all expenses paid for by Tal Oil, which is the lead company among the Jubilee partners. And
did they choose you because you come from the Western region?
Well, not quite. It's a really rigorous process of choosing people. But I think that the more important issue is that, yes, it is good that we invest in things like that. But when I went to Cape 3 Point, I met people my age who, like me, had dreams of starting a career before 2007. 2007, when I first went to Cape 3 Point, I lived in the house of a young man called Paul. Paul had just finished senior high school in 2007, just like me. He, at the time, told me he wanted to be an engineer. I went back, and he had told me all the big things he wanted to become, how good life was going to be if oil had gone well, and expecting he was going to land a job because oil had come. Now, he didn't get the money to go to university. He didn't, first of all, have the grades to go to university, and it's because there is such a poor foundational educational system. People who come out of the system themselves, like him, do not have the opportunity to even move on. So he couldn't go to university. He now has a child. He hasn't got a job. And it's so for many young people in Takoradi and the communities around the area. And so in in many ways, I saw myself in him, but I saw the opposite,
Yeah.
which is because I am a beneficiary, but he has lost out. And I think that such inequalities are the reason why, if we are not careful, we are going to end up having winners and losers out of this industry.
So when is this documentary showing again?
So it's a 2-part film. The first part, which was basically looking at Cape 3 Point, taking me back to Cape 3 Point to look at what has changed, went yesterday. It went at 6:30, but of course in subsequent times on Joy News we are going to show it again.
Sure.
And then the continuation of which is the second part, goes today at 6:30 as well. That is centered in Takoradi, the regional capital, and it follows the lives of people who are facing high rent. I interview people who estate people who are losing out big time because their houses are not going. And
so that's 6:30 today.
6:30 today.
All right.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll be following through on this one.
Thank
we'll give
you
you feedback.
Thank
but
you.
this is a good job.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Justice is my colleague, and he's put together this documentary. I mean, this is like real life experience, taking him back to a region where he belongs. So watch it at 6:30 right here on Joy News. Stay with us. My fire conversation with Mr. Prince Billy Anaglate is up next here on our show.